Thank you, Dr. Schubert, for being my thesis advisor. And thank you for being patient with me during the whole project. Thank you for Dr. Holmes for being my second reader. And thank you, Dr. Shields, for being my third panel. And thanks, everybody, for coming to my oration. Let's start with prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We fly into your heart of compassion, there to take refuge, O Theotokos. Do not despise our supplication in times of distress, but deliver us from perils. O glorious and blessed Virgin Mary. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Lay the seed of wisdom.
Pray for us.
Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I wonder, have you ever been lost? Like physically lost? Let's say you have gone to a new city. For example, you have gone to Europe for a tour, and you find yourself on a four-way street. You have no idea where you want to go. Like, you don't have any directions. You don't have your phone with you. You don't have any Google Maps with you. You can't ask Siri where you want to go. You can't go like, hey, Siri, I'm lost. You are just lost. Have you ever been emotionally lost or having the feeling of being lost and uncertain about your path in life? We all have been there in some point, have we? The Divine Comedy starts with someone being lost in a dark wood, somewhere in Flores. Quote 1. Midway in the journey of our life, I came to myself in a dark wood, for the straightway was lost. Straightway was lost? Which is the straightway? In this oration, I'm going to talk about a lost man named Dante who has strayed from the straight path. From the quote which I just read, we learn two things. The first thing, we learn that Dante is at the middle point of his life. He is middle-aged, about 30 to 35 years old. The second thing which we learn is that Dante is lost in a deep, dark forest. We have no idea where he is coming. We have no idea where he is going, although at the end of Divine Comedy, we know where he's going. But right now, he's just lost. And more importantly, he doesn't tell us the reason why he's lost. In this oration, 1, I'm going to talk about how Dante gets off the main path. 2, I'm going to address about lady philosophy and Lady Beatrice, ladies. 3, I'm going to talk about how he struggles to find himself between two ideas. And these ideas are being represented by these two ladies which I just mentioned, Lady Philosopher and Beatrice. And lastly, I'm going to talk how he gets rescued by Beatrice, which eventually leads him out of darkness, shows him the straight path, and leads him into the light of God. How does Dante get off the main path? Well, it all starts with Beatrice. Beatrice is the woman who is behind Dante's motivation to write the Divine Comedy. But who is Beatrice? Dante first sees Beatrice when he was 9 years old. And by then, he was too shy to say anything to her. But the first time Dante sees Beatrice, he devotes his love and life to her. In the La Vida Nova, Dante talks how he falls in love with Beatrice. Quote number 2. From then on, indeed, love ruled over my soul, and how he gives his undying devotion to her, which was thus worthy to love early in life, and he began to acquire such assurance and mastery over me, owing to the power which my imagination gave love, that I was obliged to fulfill all his wishes perfectly. In other words, we can see that Dante was completely in love and devoted to Beatrice. Later on, when he was after 9 years old, he sees Beatrice again, but he never talks to her. I mean, he talks to her only once. I think it was just like a greeting. But as you can see on the picture, like he loves her from a distance, but he is so infatuated with the idea of Beatrice, such that he starts writing sonnets in praise of Beatrice. But he never marries her. And as I've already said, he just like loves her from a distance. But he is so infatuated with idea of Beatrice, and he sees her as too good for him, even as a divine being. But 3, she did not seem the daughter of a mortal man, but of God. At the end, Beatrice was married to a wealthy man, and she dies at the age of 24. We don't exactly know how she dies, but some say that she died while giving birth. And then after the death of Beatrice, Dante is crying. He's looking for a shoulder to lean on, and he's looking for comfort. He's lost because he has lost. He's lost because he has lost the love of his life, Beatrice. And the second reason why Dante is lost at the beginning of the Divine Comedy, it's a political reason. Dante was born and raised in Florence, Italy. By then, there were 2 warring factions, the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. The Guelphs were supported by the Pope, and the Ghibellines were supported by Emperor. After a long time of fighting, the Guelphs lost the war, and the city was dominated by, the Ghibellines lost the war, and the city was dominated by the Guelphs. And there was like some sort of peace after some time, but there rose another faction among the Guelphs, in which like the Guelphs were divided into 2 groups. And that groups, they were divided into the black Guelphs and white Guelphs. Dante by then was a white Guelph, and he was a Senate, like he was in the ruling class. As I've already said, the Guelphs were all supported by the Pope. So Dante saw that like this war is not going to end. So he went to Rome to speak to the Pope in order to ask peace. On his way back home, he heard that the city has been overtaken by the white Guelphs, and there was an order which was placed in the city that all the senators or the white Guelphs should be banished from the city. Dante, as one of the senators and as one of the white Guelphs, he was not allowed to enter into the city walls of Florence. But then he lost his family, he lost everything, he lost his property, and he has no idea where he wants to go or what to do in his life. In other words, he was forced into a midlife crisis. So Dante goes to exile, and while he is in exile, he starts reading Boethius' consolation philosophy. He thought that, Boethius was in exile, and when he was in exile, he wrote his work, Consolation Philosophy, as a means to console himself. So Dante thought that maybe by reading Consolation Philosophy, I might be consoled. So Dante finds Lady Philosophy in Consolation Philosophy as a means to console himself. However, this marked the beginning of the years of struggle, asking himself questions like, what is the meaning of life? So he turns to Boethius' Consolation of Philosophy to answer those questions. However, he found himself among a conflict between 2 ideas, because as I've already said, that Dante devoted himself to Beatrice. Now he finds Lady Philosophy. He is on the crisis trying to choose which is the best, more especially, where should I go for consolation? Like, where should I go for comfort? But since by then Beatrice dies, he chose Lady Philosophy. And this made the thought of Beatrice fly away. So far, we have talked how Dante gets off the main path. First, he gets off the main path by losing Beatrice. Beatrice was his loved one, so he looked at Beatrice as the main path, or the means through which Dante was going to the main path. And the second reason why Dante is lost at the beginning of a Divine Comedy is that he's banished from Florence, and he goes to exile. And while he is in exile, he meets Lady Philosophy. And now let's talk about Lady Philosophy. In La Vita Nova, after the death of Beatrice, Dante is crying, he's grieving, and he is walking in the streets of Florence, and he looks around to see if someone is looking at him while he is crying. Suddenly, he sees a lady on a window who looks at Dante with compassion. Dante is moved inwardly with this gaze from this lady. He suddenly feels something, and he feels some sort of relief. And then he turned to that lady for consolation because he started feeling healing. In the Convivio, Dante gives an interpretation of the gaze of Lady Philosophy. Quote 4. And as it can happen sometimes that a man, I'm reading the wrong quote. Quote 4. And here is to be understood that the eyes of wisdom are her demonstrations, where the truth is seen with utmost certainty, and her smile is her persuasion, in which the inner light of wisdom shows beneath the veil. End quote. Dante sees Lady Philosophy as wisdom. Wisdom has eyes. What are these eyes? When Dante sees Lady Philosophy's eyes, he sees logical, syllogistic processes. Just as the eyes allows one to see the world with clarity, syllogistic reasoning allows the intellect to see the truth with clarity. This reason and logic are instruments for Dante to understand his current condition. And wisdom has a smile too. What is this smile? It is her ability to persuade, to gently urge one to move forward from one step to another. Some truths are too bright to stare at, and so wisdom smiles, varying her light so that the pathway is clear and she is approachable and understood by Dante. This might imply that, that the smile is a light of wisdom illuminating her face, allowing Dante to perceive what is beneath the veil. In other words, Dante was persuaded by the arguments of philosophy before he fully understood those arguments. And Dante was so infatuated with Lady Philosophy. In the Convivio, he gives a description of this infatuation to the point where he forgets everything about Beatrice. Quote 5. And as it can happen sometimes, that a man goes in search of silver and serendipitously finds God, which is a hidden cause presence. I, perhaps, not without divine authority, in trying to console myself, found not only the remedy for my tears, but words of authors, filled of knowledge and books. Considering this, I determined then and there that philosophy was a supreme thing. And I imagined her as a gracious lady, and I could not imagine her in any comportment that was not merciful, so that my truth sense gazed on her so willingly that I could barely turn it away from her. And from imagining her, I started going to where she was truly revealed in the schools of religious orders and at the disputations of the philosophers. So within a short time, I started to feel her sweetness to such an extent that her love drove out and destroyed every other thought, end quote, including the thought of Beatrice. So Dante replaces his devotion to Beatrice and God with a pursuit of philosophy through Lady Philosophy. However, but Beatrice does not totally abandon Dante, although Dante is trying to destroy her thought. He sees this union between lady philosophy and Dante from heaven, and she is always willing to come to help. This is great. Philosophy is great. That's what we do at this school. So we have looked at Dante pursuing philosophy as a means to find consolation. However, for some time, Dante decided to go back to Beatrice. Why is Dante going back to Beatrice? I think one thing which Dante is in philosophy, he sees that philosophy is somehow limited. He doesn't find the same type of consolation which he used to get from Beatrice. Lady philosophy doesn't fulfill his desire as Beatrice was fulfilling his desire. However, although Dante is turning back to Beatrice, Beatrice doesn't take this so easily. Well, Beatrice tells Dante that there are two swords waiting for you. Why would you betray me? Beatrice is mad at Dante. And we see the first time in Purgatorio when they were meeting, we see a church procession. Angels are singing, Benedictus que venit in nomina. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Ladies are dancing, welcoming the coming back of Dante, a lost sheep, which is now returned. But Beatrice is so mad, he's not even happy at all. So Beatrice rebukes Dante, quote 6. At that she said to me, in your desire for me, that guided you to love that good, beyond which there is nothing left to long for. What ditches or what chance did you encounter across your path to make you cast aside or hope of going forward? In tears I said, things set in front of me with their false delights, turned back my steps the moment that your countenance was hidden. What are these things that are sent in front of Dante? What are these false delights? Dante is saying that he was distracted by the pleasures of the world. The false delights that promised happiness but ultimately led him astray. He confesses that he lost his true path, Beatrice, by false shiny things that were sent in front of him. Dante, after the death of Beatrice, had the desire of turning to other specialists in consolation in order to seek a remedy for his sickness. This pursuit of philosophy has been interpreted as that Dante switched from the heavenly beatitude and turned to seek of earthly happiness. Dante shifts from the love of Beatrice, which represents heavenly grace, to pursuit of earthly remedies, which promised false happiness through lady philosophy. As Gison says, quote 7, it is the desire to substitute the love of an earthly thing, even though it were as beautiful, as noble, as beatific as philosophical wisdom. For the love of a heavenly thing like Beatrice and her beatitude. For that is certainly the question here, whether or not Dante is going to pursue the supreme beatitude, where the heavenly Beatrice invites him to seek it, or forget it, and seek only earthly beatitude in the footsteps of Aristotle. So we see how Dante switched from the love of Beatrice, which represents heavenly grace, to the love of lady philosophy, which present earthly pleasures. But now Dante is found. He has found his way back. and Beatrice has to reach him to the face of the Father. But before Dante takes on the further step, he has to repent. He has to confess his betrothed to Beatrice. So ladies took him to the river of the reef. They bathe him there, and they take him before the eyes of Beatrice. Quote 8. 1,000 desire, hotter than any flame, bound my eyes to those shining eyes, which stay fixed upon the griffin, even as the sun in a mirror, not otherwise. The two-fold beast shone forth in them, now with a one, now with its other nature. The first thing Dante sees in the eyes of Beatrice is the reflection of the griffin. According to medieval ideology, the griffin represents Christ. And we can see in the eyes of Beatrice as well, the griffin is alternating between two natures, which represents two natures of Christ incarnate. In the Divine Comedy, Dante ascends through the heavens. He sees the light of God reflected in the eyes of Beatrice. Beatrice looks at God. Dante looks at Beatrice and sees in her, as in a clear mirror, the sign from God. So we can see that Dante, before seeing the face of the Father, has to see the reflection of the Father himself in the eyes of Beatrice. So before moving on, Beatrice asks Dante to look backwards from where they have passed. And Dante looks at the spheres they have traversed, and he sees the earth as the center of the sphere. Okay, let me just draw that very quickly. That's earth. And the path is So Dante sees that when he turns to where Beatrice asks him to see, the earth is at the center, and the highest sphere, which is Saturn, it's at the farthest end. And while Dante is looking at this, he sees a reflection of light in that sphere. And he turns back to see where that light is coming from. And he sees that the point of light is coming from Beatrice's eyes. Quote 9. I remember having done gazing into the beautiful eyes, which love had made into the snare that caught me. When I turned back, my eyes were struck by what appears on that revolving sphere. If one but contemplates its circling, I saw a point that flashed a beam of light, so sharp the eye on which it burns must close against its piercing brightness. So Dante sees a point of light coming from the eyes of Beatrice. And he noticed that what he saw before has been reflected in the eyes of Beatrice, so that Earth is at the farthest end of all the spheres, and the point of light, which represents God, is coming from the eyes of Beatrice. This point marks the revelation of all deeper truths of heaven. Dante has to witness God in Beatrice's eyes. The eyes of Beatrice purifies and prepares Dante his vision to see the highlight, which is God. As Peter Karkavich points out, quote 12, Beatrice's gaze leads her love not by a return gaze, but directing his gaze upwards beyond Beatrice herself. Beatrice's gaze does not engage in a mutual or reciprocal desire, as would typical in A3, but instead it reflects his focus beyond her, towards the divine light. However, the way Dante looks at Beatrice changes, and Beatrice reminds him, but Beatrice reminds him that paradise is not solely contained within her. Quote 14, this much only of that moment can I tell, again, that when I fixed my gaze on her, my affections were released from any other longing, as long as the eternal beauty, shining its light on Beatrice, made me content with its reflected glow in her fair eyes. Conquering me with her radiant smile, she said, turn now and listen. Not in my eyes alone is Beatrice. At the end of Paradiso, Dante's view of God's glory moves from the reflection in the eyes of Beatrice to the exalted light that in self is true. Quote 15. Not that the living light at which I gazed took on other than a single aspect, for it is always what it was before. But my sight was gaining strength, even as I gazed at the soul's semblance, and as I changed, it too was being in my eyes transformed. In the deep, transparent essence of the lofty light, there appeared to me three circles, having three colors, but the same extent. So Dante is describing his mystical vision of the Holy Trinity. His sight grows stronger as he looks at the Holy Trinity. His spiritual vision is transformed. He perceives more clearly the nature of the divine. The divine light itself does not change, but Dante's capacity to understand the divine expands. So we have looked how Dante gets off the main path. First, by losing Beatrice. Second, by being banished from the seat of Flores. And at the end, he goes to exile, where he meets Lady Philosophy. We have looked at Lady Philosophy first as a lady which Dante was so infatuated, and also we have looked at the interpretation of Lady Philosophy's gaze as her eyes as demonstrations and her smile as persuasions. And we have looked at Dante going back to Beatrice and Beatrice being mad at Dante. Finally, we have looked at Beatrice as a divine jeep driving Dante to heaven to see the face of the Father. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Frank. We'll begin with questions from the panelists, and then we'll open up to questions from the audience.
I have a few questions. Frank, is Dante a good reader of Boethius? I'm looking at quote 14, where Beatrice herself says, "Not in my eyes alone is paradise."
Mm-hmm.
So if Beatrice acted as though in her eyes alone were paradise, she would be a false way.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems as though in the Consolation of Philosophy, this is the attitude Lady Philosophy takes.
Mm-hmm.
She does not present herself as beatitude.
That's true.
So is Dante's reading of the Consolation of Philosophy bad?
I think I'll answer that question in two ways. I may say yes, he led Boethius wrong. That'll be the first response to that. And I think the second response, I may say no. Maybe it again depends with what he was trying to find in Boethius' Consolation of Philosophy. Because like as we can see, Lady Philosophy in Boethius' Consolation of Philosophy too, like Lady Philosophy like tries to to heal Boethius. But after seeing that Boethius now can understand, he evokes God, and he's like, we can talk about the summum bonum without evoking God. And Dante is also like in quest of consolation. But what's so interesting is that why does Dante doesn't find consolation in that type of God? So I think maybe Dante does understands that, but what primarily he wants, it's the means in which he can get to God. So maybe he doesn't find that in Boethius' consolation philosophy, or maybe Boethius' consolation philosophy doesn't give him the answers of how can you go to God as Beatrice is giving Dante, as Beatrice is driving Dante to God. I don't know if that answers your question.
So you're saying that Dante can go to God by gazing into the eyes of Beatrice, which reflect the point of light, but he can't go to God through Lady Philosophy?
I'll say yes, because I think Boethius' consolation philosophy mostly focuses on God as a divine being, but not as God as not as a means to God. So I think Dante reached the point of like, okay, we know about God and we know about contemplation. That's the highest thing in philosophy. But the main question I think Dante has, like, how can I go to God? Because like I want to try to attain that beatitude. Mm-hmm. And as I've already said, like he doesn't see that, he doesn't find that those means in Boethius' consolation philosophy.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why he has, okay, let me turn back to Beatrice, and Beatrice will take me back to God.
Okay, thank you. I have two more questions. My next question is, why does Beatrice explain to Dante the dark and light patterns on the moon? That does not seem like a jeep taking him to God. That sounds like Lady Philosophy. Why does Beatrice sound so much like Lady Philosophy in the Paradiso?
Okay, so are you asking about like Beatrice's explanation on the moon, or why is Beatrice speaking as Lady Philosophy?
So as a reader of the Paradiso, Dante opens up very, with shock and awe. Mm-hmm. Watch out, reader. You probably can't do this. You better attach your little boat behind me or you'll be lost at sea, mm-hmm. And as a reader, you're like, all right, I'm attaching my little boat. I'm buckling up. I'm ready to go up into the heavens. Mm-hmm. And almost the first thing we get is a very scholastic explanation of how light works when it hits the moon. Mm-hmm. And as a reader, you just think, wait a minute, I feel like I'm back in one of the schools right outside of Florence, thinking about the moon. The difference is not what I'm thinking about. The difference is that Beatrice's explanation is better. She's still thinking about physics and astronomy and stuff. If Dante's supposed to turn away from Lady Philosophy, why is he still thinking about the things that they argue about in the schools?
Mm-hmm. The first way to answer your question, I don't understand the explanation which Beatrice gives about the moon, like the des and the red about it. Like I've read that multiple times, and sometimes like I try to get it, and then after reading it, I lost it. So I'm still trying to understand Dante still now. Like I don't even understand Dante, but I think coming to your question about why is Beatrice speaking like Lady Philosophy. So I think that what Dante is trying to do, like he's not trying to say Lady Philosophy is bad, Lady Philosophy it's evil. Like let's not think about Lady Philosophy. I think what he is trying to do, he's trying to make the harmony between Lady Philosophy and Beatrice. I think I'm speaking on a literary level, but I think like what Dante is trying to do here is to say it's like the whole argument about faith and reason, and I think Dante is trying to make that harmony between reason and faith to work together. So yeah, and Dante himself too, like, uses a lot of philosophy throughout the Divine Comedy.
Mhm.
And we can't say that, okay, why is he using philosophy in the Divine Comedy then? And why am I saying that, okay, philosophy is evil? So I think philosophy, it's just like a way of understanding the way we perceive reality. So how can we make people be like, how can people understand the world around them? So Beatrice is using the same mode of teaching by using philosophy in order Dante to understand things that are real tough.
Yeah.
So in the same way, like when talking about reason and faith, like we can't totally take away the reason, because like there are some things which we can't understand faith on its own. We need reason in order to understand that.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
I just want to make sure we leave time for everyone's questions.
Okay.
You've already answered mine. I have one last question. I want to look at a few texts, starting with the Inferno. The beasts that confront Dante, there are three of them, and the first two don't seem to oppress him so much.
Yeah.
But that last one casts him into despair, and the beasts seem to line up with the parts of the Inferno, with perhaps the first one being corresponding with the last part of Inferno, the fraud, the lion lining up with violence, and so the one that gets him is incontinence, right? The weakness regarding the passions and so on, and that's interesting. Thinking about how did he lose the straight way through that last beast, who's described so much in terms of the desires that she represents. She's always famished, and then if we look at the Purgatorio, he goes through 7 levels of Purgatorio. And I remember when I first read the Purgatorio, I was sort of struck that the theory is that Dante's being purged, but a lot of the time he's sort of sauntering past people who are doing the purgation stuff. He goes, hey, wow, that looks really tough, and like, you got your eyes stitched closed, and that sounds really unpleasant. So where are you from? But if we attend closely, there are 3 levels where Dante participates in the purgation. One is on the terrace of pride, because when he talks to the person there, he stoops over and takes the posture of the people carrying the rocks, and he comments later, "This is the terrace that scares me. I'm going to spend a long time here." Later, in the terrace of wrath, he also has to walk through the smoke and can't see where he's going. And then finally, and the one that struck me the most as a first-time reader is the one that Dr. Schubert mentioned at the beginning. He has to go through the fire to purge the lustful, and that's the first. Pride, he's just sort of bending next to a guy who has a rock. Wrath, he has to walk through smoke, but it doesn't seem like it's stinging his eyes or causing him to weep or anything. But the fire he describes as absolutely excruciating. That he's like he dies 1,000 times over walking through this fire, which, given the contrast with all the times he's kind of sauntered past the suffering, that last terrace just leaves me thinking, wow, Dante has something to square up with lust. And so between the beast of incontinence and the circle of lust, I look back at that lady from the window and I think, I don't know. And we got a guy whose job is sort of, well, not his day job is being a senator, but his nighttime activity is writing love sonnets, and he meets a few of his fellow songmakers at various points that are not heaven. And you get the sense that maybe Florentine love poetry needed some purifying. And so is it also the case that Dante lost the straight way through lust or through faulty human love? and incontinence in it, besides turning to Lady Philosophy? Or is Lady Philosophy the way the path through which he lost the straight way?
Yeah, I think starting with the base, like the show-off is like real kind of like interesting, even the way Dante describes it. Like she does describes the show-off, that's the main thing which turned Dante back, and the way Dante describes it is that like I think it's like on her skin, like he sees the passions kind of describes on the skin of the show-off, and he talks about like how those passions are the passions which lead man to doom. Think right there. He's thinking back in Genesis, like the fourth man, because like we see like man fall, like the humanity falls because of the passions too. So maybe that's why Dante kind of like depicts that in the show-off, like depicts the passions in the show-off as the most weakness of man, because like man falls because of like there is that like the passions surpasses now the reasons, and man falls in that way. So, and Dante, it's kind of interesting. Like I have no another clue how Dante thinks about lust, but by reading La Vita Nova, he does shows that through Lady Philosophy, through that lady which he sees on the window, because like once he turned to that lady and starts letting sonnets to that lady, he had a vision about Beatrice. Beatrice comes to him in his sleep, and Beatrice like rebukes Dante, and the way Beatrice even talks to Dante is kind of like interesting. He says like, your desire towards that lady, it's evil. It's open to the right reason. So I think in that way, like he kind of talks about like his passions towards that lady, which is a personification of Lady Philosophy. It's evil. So I think that also goes to his desire towards that lady, like his desire, kind of like not rightly ordered desire.
You think he's lusting after Lady Philosophy?
Yeah. He's lusting after Lady Philosophy.
This would kind of follow up with Dr. Holmes's question. I'm wondering, what is the evidence that lady in the window is Lady Philosophy, or that in the Purgatorio, what he's rebuked for is for turning to Lady Philosophy. There's the quote that you gave, number 6, says, "Things set in front of me with their false delight." It doesn't seem to describe philosophy, even as you presented it in the oration. He turns to Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy after being exiled, right? I suppose he could have been walking along and like somebody set the book in front of him, but that sounds more like actively, like he decided to turn to it. And philosophy things? Does it have false delights? Especially given how the amount of scholastic philosophy increases over the course of the Divine Comedy, and is, at least as I recall it, is most prominent and striking and prevalent in the Paradiso. Does it ever say in the Purgatorio that it's Lady Philosophy, that his relationship with Lady Philosophy that he had to repent of?
Okay, that's a good question. I think that's the first question which I had too when I was starting doing my project for my thesis. So on the code which you just quoted, like it doesn't like specifically says that that's Lady Philosophy, but if you go to the notes of Robert Hollander mentions that, and Robert Hollander quotes Dante Convivio, like that's one of his works which Dante wrote. But in the Convivio, Dante talks a lot about Lady Philosophy. like it's all about lady philosophy.
Okay, so it's Hollander's opinion that he's talking about lady philosophy. And you also have a quote from Gilson, you said, number 7?
Yeah, number 7.
So it's the opinion of Hollander and Gilson. The Convivio was written before Divine Comedy. And my understanding is that, as you demonstrated, quote number 5, that, yeah, he turns to lady philosophy in the Convivio.
Mm-hmm.
Where does it say, either in the Convivio or in La Vita Nuova or in the Divine Comedy, that he had to repent of turning towards lady philosophy?
Okay, can you say that question? But before you say that question again, I need to come back to your question about lady philosophy. I think somewhere else in the Purgatorio too, Beatrice talks about the schools of thought in which Dante went when he was after the death of Beatrice, trying to refer to the schools of scholastic schools, and also, yeah, that's like before the end of Purgatorio, and I think that can also kind of like shed some light to what he like to lady philosophy, and in Paradiso 2, I think should be the Canto the Sun. Like it starts talking about the schools of thought which Dante went as they were wings which were making Dante to fly downwards. Like I'm just paraphrasing what Dante says there, but it like kind of talks about the idea that Dante, when he was pursuing philosophy, like he had these wings which were kind of like taking him down, taking him downwards. So I think that also kind of also sheds some light that there he's talking about lady philosophy. Like there are just like some little pieces which I was trying to connect throughout my whole project. And coming back to Convivio, Dante himself does say that.
Say what?
That
Convivio.
Yeah, that it was lady philosophy.
It says he turns to lady philosophy. Does it say in the Convivio that he then repented of turning to lady philosophy?
No. So I think the reason, like Dante gives the reason why he writes the Convivio. The first reason was about to boost his friendship with lady philosophy, because like in the Convivio, Dante is just like praising lady philosophy. So the second reason, which he says, is like to make their relationship last. And the third reason, which is very interesting, he says like the third reason is for future haters. Like, okay, so future haters. Like,
Future haters?
yes,
Haters.
haters.
Oh, haters.
Yeah, future
Yeah.
Future haters.
Yeah, so
Accusing of infidelity.
yeah, so what he means by future haters, he talks about those people who are going to accuse him of turning to lady philosophy. So it's like he is defending himself. He's like, okay, I'm not weak, I'm not feeble to turn to this lady, but there is some aspect which is good about this lady, and he lets the whole Convivio like just praising lady philosophy. I don't know if that's kind of like satisfies you. I had the same problem with the Dr. Holmes when I was talking with him about lady philosophy.
What about St. Bernard? Why does Dante have St. Bernard as his final guide? And Beatrice is this kind of culmination of the union of faith and reason. Why is St. Bernard the final guide?
Yeah, Dante doesn't give us a lot of details about St. Bernard. But yeah, from what I know, St. Bernard is also a poet, so it makes sense to a poet to guide a poet to Mary. And also St. Bernard was devoted to Mary, like his works like are more specifically to Mary. So St. Bernard's like takes Dante to Mary, and he asks Mary to take his prayers to God so that Dante can see God. And a last bit, I'm not quite sure, talks about, I think that I just kind of like saw that when I was doing my research, it kind of talks about that St. Bernard is one of the last church fathers. Maybe that's why Dante puts him as the last guide. But I'm not sure the reason why he puts him as the last guide, but maybe that can is the reason why he puts him as the last guy.
Right, let's take questions from the audience now.
Ah, yes. Yes, yeah.
Great job. Thank you. I had a question. You mentioned briefly that Dante never really talked at length with Beatrice
Mhm.
and sort of had this admiration afar for Beatrice. Do you think there's anything significant, especially when you say at the sort of conclusion of your oration that Beatrice's eyes sort of reflect the divine?
Mhm.
Do you think that's saying something about the nature of Dante's soul in relation to the divine, that he doesn't want to, he admires it from afar, but doesn't want to approach it or get more intimately involved with it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, in the La Vita Nova, like Dante's just scared of Beatrice. Like it's very funny to read. Yeah, there was this other moment when I think there was a wedding or a funeral. I can't remember exactly, and what's his face? Dante's friend asks Dante to come to the wedding, and they were sitting on the same pew with Beatrice, and like Beatrice is the other end, Dante is the other end. But Dante, the moment when he noticed that Beatrice is there, he starts trembling inside, and he's just shivering there, and he doesn't want the people to notice how Beatrice was controlling Dante inside, and Dante runs away to his room and closed the door, and he was just crying. That's how Beatrice controls Dante is inwardly, and also just never had the courage to talk to her. I don't know, just afraid. And another thing is that I think it's a social reason, because I think Dante is middle class, and Beatrice's family it's very wealthy.
But do you think that reflects something of his relationship with the divine? Seeing as Beatrice sort of portrays the divine almost to Dante?
Yes, yeah, I think that's another good bit which Dante talks about in the La Vita Nova, how he sees Beatrice as more divine, his love to Beatrice is more divine. Because in the La Vita Nova, he starts talking about Beatrice's loves as a lord, which comes to dominate Dante and controls him and directs him to the main path, to the straight way.
Thank you, Frank, for
Yes.
your oration. I have a question about Dante's desire and kind of disposition in the Divine Comedy. At the very end of Purgatorio, when he meets Beatrice and Beatrice accuses him of turning to Lady Philosophy, it sort of seems to come just out of the blue. We don't really see in Inferno and Purgatorio a lot of, I don't think Dante ever mentions Lady Philosophy and talks about his relationship with philosophy. Is this sin that Dante needs to repent of turning away from Beatrice to Lady Philosophy present in Inferno and Purgatorio, or is this only in his previous life? Because we also see Virgil tells Dante at the end of Purgatorio that he can take pleasure in his guide now, and he crowns him minor sin, and he no longer needs the guide of Virgil. And then Beatrice is his guide in Paradiso. But it seems like there's not a huge change between Inferno and Purgatorio and Paradiso in Dante. He seems to act in a lot of the same ways, and he's always sort of asking the same questions. He's always wants to know where the souls are from, who they are, kind of what's happening in the world. He's always curious about all these other things. So yeah, do we see a change in Dante specifically once he repents of turning from Beatrice to Lady Philosophy?
Okay, you have said quite a bit number of things. You have talked about Dante's desire. If Dante's desire changes from Purgatorio to Paradiso, and like more especially his design lady philosophy, and also you have talked about lady philosophy as something which Dante doesn't talk a lot in Inferno and Purgatorio. So yeah, I think that's true. I think like in Paradiso, like when Dante, when Beatrice rebukes Dante, like he talks about I'm trying to remember. Yeah, like when Dante first sees Beatrice, it reminds him of like he talks about like ancient love. So I think when he's talking about like that ancient love, he is referring to like the philosophy. I might be wrong, but I think he's referring to the odd type of love which Dante was trying to pursue when he was young. But we don't see that in Inferno or Purgatorio until that moment. And does his desire changes? Talking about desire, it's quite interesting because in the Paradiso, desire has been portrayed as the same, because Dante defines desire as a liking, and he defines desire as a liking. And when you are desiring something, you are pursuing something which you don't have. And in Paradiso, the souls don't like anything, and their desire is the same. So, that's one of my thoughts when I'm reading the Paradiso, that like the souls in Paradiso, more especially also like Dante's desire is the same at all time. And also another thing which is kind of interesting is that when we're talking about desire, we're talking about like this curiosity, like in Dante, when asking questions when it comes to the souls, because like his desire in Inferno and Purgatorio is to know more about the soul sins, like where they're coming from and whatnot. And he asks those questions to Virgil, and Virgil answers them. But when it comes to Paradiso, that changes. Why? Because like this, the desire is the same. Like Dante talks about like where the will and power is the same, whereby like Beatrice knows exactly what Dante wants and just says, okay, I know what you're going to ask. You're going to ask this. And then like Beatrice goes ahead and asks Dante. Okay, I don't know if I've touched all your questions.
I think we're gonna have to end here. So let's thank Frank.